Hi, this is Deacon Larry, and this is Renewed. Hello. While we're in the midst of the season of Lent as we're filming this, I want to talk to you about a subject that is a form of prayer that's good for us throughout the year. It's the ancient tradition within the Church of the Stations of the Cross. For many people, they may not be familiar with the Stations of the Cross, although every Catholic church that you walk into has stations either indoor or outside the church. These 14 or 15 places that mark the journey of Christ. The origin of the Stations of the Cross was the very path that Christ walked, the Via Dolorosa, as it is said today, in Jerusalem. You can go and you can follow what is, by tradition, the path that Christ walked from his condemnation to the Holy Sepulchre, to where he rose from the dead. The Stations of the Cross developed because it was an early tradition of the church that people would go to Jerusalem. Very often go to Jerusalem as a pilgrimage, a moment of change in their lives, and they would take that journey and walk the steps with Christ. They weren't fixed in history as they are today. It's said at times that there were 33 stations, depending on what way a path one walked and what activities in the Christ journey that you marked by your prayer. But as it happened, the Crusades came along, Muslims and Christians fighting over the possessions of the Holy Lands. Finally, in the 1200s, the holy sites in Jerusalem were given under the care of the Franciscans. And along the way, in the course of the Crusades, the access to many of those holy sites and that Via Dolorosa was not available. It was much more difficult, at least because you were entering into a dangerous area of war. And so pilgrims began to take the stations to their homes, to their hometowns and home churches, and think, how do we walk? How do we imitate this walk if we cannot go and be at the Via Dolorosa itself? And so the stations emerged. These 14 stations. The stations in tradition include such things as Simon the Cyrenian helping Jesus to carry the cross that we find in Scripture. There's also Veronica wiping the face of Christ, which is not found in Scripture, but is in our tradition. There are also the 3 falls of Jesus as he makes his pathway up to the crucifixion. Certainly the crucifixion, the nailing to the cross, the crucifixion, the death of Christ as stations that are very much part of our scriptural story of the gospel account of Jesus' passion, death, and resurrection. The stations for us, why are they meaningful? Not just because they recall Christ's journey, but because they allow us to let that journey inform us as we make our journey through life. In the times when we're dealing with particular sufferings, one of the great events in the church, and quite frankly, since the Second Vatican Council, is the unfolding of numerous kinds of Stations of the Cross. There's Stations of the Cross for the elderly, prayers that particularly speak to the journey of the elderly. There's Stations of the Cross for women and for mothers who are going through particular trials in their journey in life. There are stations across for those who are addicted, those who are imprisoned, many different characteristic ways in which we deal with struggle in our life. Here at St. Theresa's over the years, we've tended to favor one of the most traditional forms of the Stations of the Cross, which is that of St. Alphonsus Liguori. You can easily find those stations on the internet today and any Catholic bookstore online. We've also used one that's called the Every Person's Way of the Cross, a much more poetic and contemporary way of praying the stations. The stations don't come to us like so many prayers of the church, the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory Be, in a fixed form that we are required to pray if we're praying that prayer. The stations give us the ability to breathe our journey and our sufferings into the experience of Christ and his journey. It's a reminder to us that Christ's journey to the cross wasn't just about satisfying sin. It was about his solidarity with us so that he might journey with us, so that we might be free. The stations, whether we're praying them during Lent, which I'd encourage and is a wonderful opportunity for us, but also throughout the year, don't think you only can pray the stations in Lent. Any time that we want to journey and be informed and understand and be encouraged by the journey of Christ to the cross, we can pray the stations. In a particular way, the stations end today with a 15th station. And that 15th station is the resurrection. Whether we're praying in Lent or whether we're praying in another season of the year or a season of our life, it's a reminder for us that the story doesn't end at the cross, it ends at the resurrection. If we know that, when we suffer as we die, we will remember we will be renewed in rising.
Please like, subscribe, or comment below.